As I've reflected on the passage that we were in on Sunday, 1 Peter 5, reflecting on it the past few days, I find myself reflecting a bit on the relationship between the majority of you listening, those attending, the members, and then those of us who have been called to lead the body here at NSC, those that the Bible calls, as we heard again on Sunday, the elders. I'm not sure if you realize it or not, but it's not always easy to walk into the pulpit and preach a message like this on Sunday. I think that there's fear and nervousness and our struggle with authority. All of that gets in the way of hoping that I'll preach both the role of the elder and the member well. Which really is kind of strange when you think of it, isn't it? If God's word, all of it, is indeed good, which I believe, which we believe, then it shouldn't be all that difficult. If this is God's good word given to us for our good, and the glory of his name being proclaimed, should be rather easy. But I think at times it's hard for those of us as called as elders to preach these passages, for fear that, hey, we're telling you to listen up to us as we sit in the seat of power. Maybe it's difficult for you to hear, because that's what it might feel like in hearing it. And so some defenses might go up. So church, how do we walk through this well together? In order to continue to be the bride of Christ, to reflect his glorious image, to live together in such a way that the world would look in and see the wonderful beauty of the God that we worship. I think we need to come back to hearing Peter's words in verse 5 of chapter 5. Words that we looked at on Sunday, where we read, "Clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility toward one another." Without a humble heart and spirit, pride will get in the way, destroying our ability and hopefully our desire to live in such a fashion. In following those words, Peter goes on to write to the church, "For God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble." If you tuned in on Sunday, we heard the words again from Philippians chapter 2, where Paul, in writing about Christ, writes this, "Who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men." And of course, being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. If we think of what Peter charges the elders with on Sunday, we can only do that by humbling ourselves before God as elders. In working tirelessly to protect the flock against the wolves that seek to devour and destroy them. To do this willingly, not like a duty when sometimes it just seems to take up so much time or it's so hard. To not domineer and lord it over others when we've been given positions of leadership. That could be a real struggle. And we need to seek the humility of Christ in order that we don't lead in that domineering fashion. And we can only, on the other hand, submit to leadership and follow the shepherds by humbling ourselves before God, not seeking power and prestige ourselves, but rather seeking the glory of God to be displayed in our lives together as the church of Jesus Christ. In the days that Paul wrote this, as we heard on Sunday, humility was taken as a sign of lowly slave mentality. Yet as we heard commentator Karen Jobes write, true humility, as opposed to a contrived self-degrading humiliation, flows from recognizing one's complete dependence on God and is expressed by the acceptance of one's role and position in God's economy. With such humility, one is freed from attempts to gain more power or prestige. Instead, humility expresses itself in the willingness to serve others, even beyond one's self-interest. And NSC, I acknowledge that walking in such a humble fashion is a daily battle, isn't it? It requires us becoming less while Christ would daily increase. But think of the days that Peter's writing in. Days that are becoming far more familiar to us. How do we stand firm and strong together as a church, strengthening each other to hold on to the gospel through perilous times? I think it's by hearing Peter's words here. Humbling ourselves, asking for the grace to humbly accept where God has put us and to live together as shepherds and sheep for the sake of the kingdom. Knowing that this is all for our good and the glory of God to be displayed. NSC, I pray we be that church, and that God would so wonderfully be displayed and seen as beautiful in our lives together. See you next week.